Last week on Don't Talk TV, we had a look at the government bill C-63, which increased penalties for so-called hate crimes, as well as introduced some other troubling things like a pre-crime house arrest availability on 810 peace bonds. This week, I want to cover a private member's bill that had gone a bit under the radar, including for me. I just noticed it this week, that I believe is even more troubling, and that is Bill C-367. Hello, my name's Nicholas Wansbutt. I'm a lawyer in Stratford, Ontario, Canada, and welcome to Don't Talk TV. So it was actually back in November that the Bloc Québécois introduced a private member's bill by Monsieur Blanchet, the leader of that party, Bill C-367, that proposes to remove the defense of religious belief, honestly held religious belief, when it comes to hate crimes. So today on Don't Talk TV, I want to take a look at that law, talk about what I think the potential implications of that if it becomes law, and then have a brief discussion on, can they get away with this? Will this actually go through? Would courts uphold it? So let's take a look at the text of the bill first and compare it to the current criminal code. It's a very short bill, so this should be fairly quick. So here we have Bill C-367, sponsored by Monsieur Blanchet. We can skip right past the summary and look at the full text of it. The text is simply this: delete paragraph 319 sub 3 sub b of the criminal code and delete paragraph 319 sub 3.1 sub b of the criminal code. Let's have a look at the criminal code to see what they're deleting. So as you can see, section 319, that's the incitement of hatred. Sub 2 is everyone who, by communicating statements other than in private conversation, willfully promotes hatred, is guilty of indictable offense. As we talked last week, that 2 years is being upped to 5 years by C-63, assuming it goes through. Then we have 2.1, that's the Holocaust questioning law, courtesy of the Conservative Party of Canada. Now, what's being deleted? Defenses under sub 3. Sub 3 sub b is being deleted, so sub 3 says no person shall be convicted of an offense under subsection 2 if, in good faith, the person expressed or attempted to establish by an argument an opinion on a religious subject or an opinion based on a belief in a religious text. So that's proposed to be deleted entirely. No longer a defense that you're making a religious argument or that you have a religious opinion. Likewise, for 2.1, that being the Holocaust questioning, you're not allowed to, you have no defense if you were in good faith attempting to establish by an argument or opinion on a religious subject, an opinion based on a belief in a religious text. So I think that act is pretty straightforward with what it means. They want to take away religious freedom when it comes to certain topics. You're essentially, if this goes through, you are not allowed to speak against homosexuality. You're not allowed to say that according to my religious beliefs, according to these sections of the Bible or these theological beliefs of my religion, you're not allowed to say that I believe this is wrong, because that could be considered inciting hatred. Or you couldn't even say that I don't believe other religious groups are right. I believe that my religion is the true religion. That's why I belong to it. You could potentially run afoul of this law. Now, I think that takes us directly into the, can they get away with this? Will they get away with it? Well, I think there's a number of reasons to doubt that this will even become law. First and foremost, the fact that it's a private member's bill, and it was in fact introduced in November of 2023, it's still at first reading, hasn't gotten to second reading yet. That suggests to me that it's highly unlikely that this bill will make it all the way to royal assent before the election in 2025. So from that regard, it seems unlikely that this will actually become law. Whether the Conservatives will revisit this law when they're in power, since, as I've said, I anticipate they'll most likely be the next government, that remains to be seen. As I said, they're the ones who did introduce the law prohibiting you from questioning the Holocaust. I don't know whether they'll want to go down this route as well. From a constitutional standpoint, will the courts uphold this if it becomes law? And that's an interesting question. Now, before COVID-19, I would have said there's no way that the courts will uphold this. It's clearly a violation of right of religious freedom. I haven't gone back to the Hansards all the way back into the 1980s when this section was first introduced. Section 319 first came into being. I'm sure that among those discussions were the reason why this law is justified is we're putting in these defenses, these protections, specifically, among others, we're protecting people's religious liberty. And that's how it came into law. Now, the reason I say before COVID-19, I would have said there's no way courts would uphold this is because I look at some of the court decisions that happened during COVID-19 and the way they treated religious liberty, especially when it was compared to the liberties that were given to retailers such as Costco and Walmart, who are allowed to have unlimited numbers of people, whereas in churches they were down to 5 people at sometimes, and in Manitoba at certain times they were down to 0. They were not allowed to have religious services at all. So some of those decisions make me think that maybe courts would uphold a law like this, or not allowing a defense for religious beliefs. So we'll take a look at 2 decisions, one from Ontario and one from Manitoba. The first decision from Ontario is on Ontario versus Trinity Bible Chapel, 2022 ONSC 1344. That was a Kitchener decision, but interestingly, it was ruled on by Justice Pomerantz, who does not preside in Kitchener. I'm not exactly sure where Justice Pomerantz is from. I just know she's not a Kitchener judge, and she was recently the one who ruled on the Veltman case, the murder case involving the individual who drove over a Muslim family in London, Ontario. And I believe I've seen Justice Pomerantz on decisions from Windsor for COVID-19. So Justice Pomerantz seems to coincidentally or not coincidentally show up when the government needs a certain type of decision. Skipping ahead to paragraph 167, I think this is the crux of the decision here. Now, Justice Pomerantz did find that the restrictions on religious gatherings imposed by the Ontario government did violate Section 2 of the Charter as far as religious liberty, but then on a Section 1 analysis, she said it was a reasonable restriction. Now, the decision on Section 1 was many pages long, but I thought paragraph 167 is one of the keys to it. So she said, quote, "I have found that the religious gathering limits infringe Section 2A by interfering with the ability of claimants to engage in religious activity as a collective in-person congregation. I stand by that finding. I also accept the religious gathering limits had negative impact on the psychological well-being of church members as chronicled in the affidavit evidence filed with the court. Yet, it remains the fact that, despite the claimant's characterization as such, there is never a complete ban on religious gatherings or religious activity. It was always open to churches to deliver services to congregants, albeit in a less than optimal fashion." Now here she's talking about doing it over video. Maybe not all religions, certainly my religious beliefs require in-person attendance. I won't get into the theology of it, but this just shows that the government is saying this is the only way you're allowed to worship, that if you have a religion that says you have to be in person for whatever reason, no, you don't. We're setting the parameters for religion. So it says, gathering limits imposed a significant burden on religious activity, but they did not prevent it from occurring. During much of the pandemic, churches were at liberty to gather the congregation for outdoor services, while other forms of assembly, such as virtual and drive-in meetings, were not the equivalents of in-person services. They could facilitate dissemination of religious content. The point is that the deleterious effects of the gathering limits are mitigated by the fact that other means of religious expression were available. Now, I think this is important and relevant for considering whether 367 would be upheld, because I could see a court using similar wording where they're saying, well, we're not stopping you from having a religious belief. You're just not allowed to talk about this topic or that topic, or you just can't talk about it that way, or it can only be done privately. You can't preach sermons about this, or you can't go out on the side of the street. You can't be a street preacher. And I think it's part of the analysis of where the deleterious effects of not prohibiting religious worship they greatly outweigh the benefits of religious worship, because I think it's clear from these judgments that the justices don't put a lot of value on religious worship. It's seen as something that's nice, to do on a Sunday. It's good to see friends. They notice they only talk about psychological impact, not spiritual impact, because the spiritual doesn't exist. The attending, going to the store and buying food, going to the liquor store and getting liquor, that's reality. But going to church on Sunday, that's just silliness and sweetness and softness and niceness, but it has nothing to do with reality. So you don't really need to do it. The other decision is Gateway Bible Baptist Church versus Manitoba, 2021 MBQB 2019. Now, this case really broke my hopes for this country because it was ruled on by a judge who I have great respect for, Justice Joyal. I appeared in front of him a number of times when I was a Crown Attorney in Manitoba. I always thought he was an excellent judge, a very fair judge, very reasonable judge, and one who had real strong respect for the Charter of Rights and Freedoms. So when I heard he had this case, I thought, here's a real chance for these COVID measures to be shut down. And when he ruled the way he did it, that was really a surprise and disappointing to me. Paragraph 325, this is the crux of the decision, in my view. Again, like Justice Pomerantz, he found that the restrictions on attending religious gatherings, which at one point in Manitoba was absolute, did violate the right to freedom of religion, but under the Section 1 analysis, he felt that the government was justified. So here he said, quote, Manitoba argues persuasively that it has long been recognized that the potential to harm one's neighbors provides a reasonable basis for limiting the freedom to manifest one's beliefs, opinions, and conscience. In other words, freedom of religion, for example, must be exercised with due respect for the rights of others and subject to such limitations as are necessary to protect public safety, order and health, and the fundamental rights and freedoms of others. As Manitoba has insisted, this approach does not repudiate religious freedom, but instead it facilitates its exercise so as to take the general well-being of others into account. That right there is the exact wording that I could see used in a case where a priest is arrested for preaching a sermon, for example, saying that homosexuality is immoral. There's many religions that believe that. I could see a situation where a court uses that exact wording, saying that, no, you don't have a right to hurt the feelings of other people. Well, specifically, you don't have the right to hurt the feelings of LGBT community people or certain other religious groups. Again, I hearken back to episode 165. You can see exactly how this law will be applied. There's certain religious groups who will never be arrested regardless of what they say, and people will be able to say whatever they want about Christians and Christianity. That will never be considered hate. I mean, that's just a practical observation of mine based on many years of experience. This law, in my view, really is an attack on Christianity, and it's a step towards making Christianity illegal. And I said during COVID that I felt COVID was a trial run. It was also an opportunity to create precedents that could be used, and now we're starting to see those precedents, how they can be applied to other areas, and how that will be extremely dangerous to our people, that being the people of Canada. So, in this episode, we've looked at what is Bill C-367. I've discussed very briefly what I think the implications of that are, and I've talked a little bit about, do I think they'll get away with it? Will that become law, and will it stay law? Will the courts uphold it? Short answer is I don't know. I don't have a crystal ball, but I think it's doubtful that it makes it to law. If it does make it to law, whether it's upheld by courts that you don't get this defense anymore, that remains to be seen. This video is not legal advice. If you need legal advice, contact a lawyer. If you choose me as that lawyer, my contact information is listed below. We're always open for show topic suggestions, so please, if you have one, send an email to the email address listed below. Please do not send to my law firm website, because different people monitor my law firm website that have nothing to do with Don't Talk TV, so it may go completely unanswered or it'll take a long time to be answered. So email the Don't Talk TV address. And if you found this video at all interesting, helpful, or informative, please consider liking, sharing, subscribing, and following us on social media.